My name is Emily Carter. My father was the heart of our family business until he got sick, and my brother Aaron erased me from everything, right down to the will. What he didn't know. Our dad left me something far more powerful than money, and it would bring everything crashing down around him. Where are you watching this video from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. It was raining like the sky couldn't stand what was about to happen. The kind of steady, relentless drizzle that blurred the pine trees outside my kitchen window and soaked into everything it touched. I stood in my small house in Durham, North Carolina, phone pressed to my ear, trying to keep my voice calm. "Aaron, he doesn't have much time left," I said quietly, gripping the counter with my free hand. "He's asking for you." My brother's voice came through sharp, almost amused. "I'm not flying back for some melodrama, Em. We said goodbye years ago. You're the one still pretending." I blinked. "He's dying. Can't you put the past aside for one visit?" Aaron gave a short laugh. "You were always good at guilt trips, but I've got meetings, I've got a life. You chose to be the martyr, not me." Then the line went dead. I didn't cry. I'd used up all my tears the first time Aaron walked away 2 years ago when Dad had his first stroke and Aaron had every excuse in the world not to come home. Business trips. Conferences. "I'm not good at hospitals," he said, like anyone was. Now the hospice was quiet except for the soft hiss of the oxygen machine and the creak of the rocking chair I sat in beside my father's bed. He looked so small in that room. My tall, strong, always-in-charge dad, his skin pale and almost translucent under the harsh overhead light. "Dad," I whispered, brushing a damp strand of gray hair from his forehead. "I talked to Aaron." His eyelids fluttered, and for a second I didn't think he'd heard me. But then he gave me a slow, shaky smile. "You've always been the one I'm proud of," he rasped. My chest tightened. "I know," I said, forcing a smile through the ache. "It's just hard." He squeezed my hand weakly, and then his breathing steadied into a slow, strained rhythm again. I sat with him until the sky outside turned darker and the rain softened into mist. Hours passed in silence, and I kept staring at my phone, hoping maybe Aaron would call back. Maybe he'd change his mind. But he didn't. And when the nurse finally stepped in and whispered, "You should get some rest," I just nodded, numb. In the hallway, the walls were painted a cheery yellow that felt like a cruel joke. I leaned against them, heart heavy, feeling like a rope pulled too tight for too long. Back in my car, I sat in the dark for a while, listening to the rain tapping against the windshield. Then slowly I picked up my phone again. This time I didn't call Aaron. I opened my camera, looked into the lens, and whispered, "He asked for you." I didn't send it. I just saved it. Because something in my gut told me I'd need proof someday. A week passed like it was dragging chains behind it. Every morning I'd drive back to the hospice and sit beside my father, watching the sunlight crawl across the same sterile floor tiles. And every afternoon, I'd open my phone, scroll through Aaron's social media, and try not to scream. Not one post, not a word, not a message asking, "How is he?" Or "Did he make it through the night?" Just pictures of cocktails, corner offices, and his tan face grinning like the world had never bruised him. Dad was slipping away in slow motion, and my brother was posing with investors like it was just another quarter to conquer. I sat with that silence. It said more than words ever could. One morning, I brought an old photo album to the hospice. The leather was cracked and stiff, the pages worn soft at the edges. I flipped through it quietly while Dad dozed beside me, the machine beside him humming its rhythm. There we were, me, Aaron, and Dad at the lake when we were kids. Aaron with his wild curls and crooked grin, and me with skinned knees and freckles, holding a fish Dad helped me catch. Back then, we'd all laughed at the same things. Back then, Dad believed Aaron would take over the business and I'd go off and do something softer, teaching, maybe, or design. Funny how everyone expects the loudest kid to be the leader. I reached over and brushed Dad's thinning hair. His skin was cool today, but his eyelids fluttered. "Do you remember that trip?" I asked softly. "You grilled those tiny fish, even though they were all bone. You told Aaron not to toss his back, and he pouted for hours." No answer, just the faint wheeze of breath. I sighed and sat back. The room smelled like antiseptic and those vanilla-scented plug-ins nurses used to hide the truth. But nothing could cover the smell of time running out. My phone buzzed. It was Jenny, my best friend since high school. Jenny, still no word from Aaron, me, nothing. Not even a how's he doing. Jenny, he's a coward. But you're the only one who stayed. I stared at that message for a long time. Was that why I stayed? Or was it because I couldn't bear the idea of Dad dying alone? He deserved better than that. Better than silence and luxury suits and ghost son apologies that never came. You know what the worst part is? I murmured aloud. He didn't even flinch. I told him you were dying and he laughed. Dad didn't move. I leaned closer, lowered my voice like I was confessing to someone who might already be halfway gone. He always came first. You gave him the business. You put his name on the building. I didn't mind, not really. But this. Letting him pretend you don't matter. Letting him skip the end like it's an inconvenient meeting. My throat caught. I won't let him walk away from this like it was nothing. And just like that, I felt it. A quiet promise settled in my chest, sharp and certain. No big speech, no thunder, just a line drawn in the sand of my heart. Aaron could pretend all he wanted, but I knew the truth. Dad knew it too. And whatever came next, I wasn't going to be the quiet one anymore. The morning of the funeral arrived cloaked in heavy, slate-colored clouds. The sky looked like it hadn't slept. Neither had I. I slipped into a black dress that still had creases from the dry cleaner, tugged a simple coat over my shoulders, and pinned my hair back in a twist my fingers barely cooperated with. The world outside was soaked in grief, and so was I at the cemetery gates. I paused. For a moment, I thought maybe Aaron wouldn't show. Maybe he'd found a way to justify skipping this, too. But then I saw it. A silver sports car rolled in through the gravel drive, tires crunching like it owned the earth. Aaron stepped out wearing a $1,000 suit, designer sunglasses perched on his perfect nose, even though the sun hadn't made an appearance all week. He adjusted his cufflinks like we were headed into a board meeting. "Nice of you to finally show," I said under my breath. Aaron didn't look at me as he approached the casket. He moved slowly, dramatically, pulling a single red rose from his lapel and placing it delicately on top of the polished wood like a scene from a movie. He hadn't visited once, hadn't spoken to Dad in years. But now, in front of the few mourners who had shown up, old business partners, a couple of retired employees, Jenny, he played the grieving son with Oscar-worthy precision. I stood stiffly beside the casket, jaw clenched, hands folded so tightly my knuckles ached. When the pastor began the final prayer, Aaron dabbed at his eyes with a silk handkerchief. I wanted to scream. Afterward, we ended up in the lawyer's office downtown. The building was old, the kind with creaky floors and crown molding that had seen generations of family secrets pass through. Mr. Lawson, our father's longtime attorney, greeted us with a respectful nod and motioned for us to sit. Aaron leaned back in his chair, legs crossed, fingers steepled. I sat upright, bracing myself. "I know this isn't easy," Mr. Lawson began, clearing his throat. "Your father made several amendments to his estate plan over the years. His final version was signed and notarized 6 months before his passing." He looked between us. "I'll read it in full." Aaron gave me a sideways glance, like he already knew what was coming. "To my daughter Emily," Mr. Lawson read, "I leave the property located at 214 Brookstone Hollow, a parcel of land including the farmhouse once owned by my grandfather." I blinked. The old farm. That place hadn't been touched in decades. Everyone called it the shack. Mr. Lawson continued. "To my son Aaron, I leave controlling interest in Carter Industrial Group and all associated assets." The rest of the words blurred together. My heart dropped. Aaron let out a breath, almost a chuckle. "Well," he said, "guess hard work pays off." He reached across the desk and plucked the set of keys Mr. Lawson had placed in front of him, spinning them around his finger like a kid with a new toy. I sat frozen. The room felt like it had been drained of air. "A broken-down farm," Aaron said, smirking. "That's your prize." I didn't speak. I couldn't, because if I did, I wasn't sure what would come out. Aaron stood and straightened his jacket. "I have a company to run. Good luck with the what is it? Beetles and termites." The door clicked shut behind him. I sat there, hands trembling in my lap. But as the silence settled in, something hardened inside me. It wasn't just grief anymore. It wasn't even anger. It was the beginning of something else, something quiet, something razor-sharp. He thought he'd won. He had no idea what he'd just set in motion. 2 weeks after the funeral, I saw it. Aaron posted a photo on his social media. Shirt sleeves rolled up, sunglasses on, standing between not one but two brand new sports cars. The caption read, "Hard work looks good on me. See all life." I didn't even have the energy to be angry. I just stared at the screen, letting the shallowness of it wash over me like lukewarm bathwater. "He used our father's name like a coupon," I said to Jenny as we drove out toward Brookstone Hollow. Jenny clicked her tongue. "I still can't believe he gave you that wreck. I mean, no offense, but didn't raccoons practically take over that place?" I managed a small laugh. "No offense taken. That farm's been abandoned since I was in high school. Dad never even mentioned it after we moved into town." "Well," she said, maneuvering around a pothole, "maybe it's time we find out why he left it to you at all." The gravel road stretched before us like an old scar, familiar but faded. Branches hung low over the drive, swaying gently as we passed. And there it was, at the end of the lane, slouched against the woods like it had given up decades ago. The farmhouse. Its white paint had long since peeled into gray. Shutters hung crooked like tired eyes. The porch steps groaned as we climbed them, warning us away. Jenny hesitated. "Are you sure this is safe?" I didn't answer. I just pushed open the door. The air inside was thick with dust and damp wood, the kind of smell that clings to old furniture and buried memories. Floorboards moaned beneath our feet. Spiderwebs stretched between ceiling beams like fine lace. We explored slowly. Broken glass on the floor. A child's chair in the corner. Yellowing curtains that disintegrated when I touched them. "This place is haunted," Jenny muttered, pulling her hoodie tighter. I moved through the rooms with a strange mix of dread and curiosity. Something about this place felt unfinished, like it had been waiting. In the back of the house, we found the kitchen, or what was left of it. Cabinets hung open, rusted hinges barely holding on. A dead mouse lay curled in the sink like it had gone to sleep and never woken up. "This is what he thought I was worth," I said quietly. "A rotting house and a patch of weeds." "You sure there's nothing else?" Jenny asked. "No note, no safe or hidden drawer." I shook my head, stepping carefully into the next room. "If there's a message here, it's loud and clear." But then it happened. In the hallway, one of the floorboards creaked louder than the others, then gave way beneath my foot. There was no time to catch myself. I plunged through with a shout, crashing down into darkness. "Emily!" Jenny screamed from above. My leg throbbed. Pain shot through my arm. I landed hard, coughing as dust filled my mouth. Jenny's face appeared above, panicked. "Don't move, I'm calling someone." I blinked up at her, dazed. "I'm okay, I think. Just give me a second." As she scrambled to get help, I looked around, trying to get my bearings. I was in some kind of cellar. Stone walls, dirt floor, no windows, just shadows and silence. And then something caught my eye. Partially buried beneath the dirt near my feet was a metal box, rusted but intact. My heart skipped. I dragged myself toward it, fingers trembling, wiped the grime away. The latch groaned, but it opened. Inside, there was nothing shiny. No gold, no jewels. Just a bundle of aged papers, tied together with twine, and a small velvet pouch. I opened the pouch first. Inside was a single brass key. Then I picked up the papers. The top one was a folded note, yellowed and thin from time, written in my father's unmistakable hand. "For Emily, my true legacy lies where truth is hidden." That's when I knew. This wasn't some accident. This wasn't pity or punishment. It was a clue, a start. He'd left me more than a broken house. He'd left me a secret. And I was going to find it, no matter what it cost me. Hospitals always smell the same, bleach and too much air freshener, like they're trying to scrub away the truth. I lay back against the stiff white pillow, my leg propped up in a thick cast and my arm cradled in a sling. Bruises bloomed down my ribs like watercolor, and every breath reminded me how far I'd fallen. Jenny sat beside my bed, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when she noticed me staring at the box. "You haven't opened it again." I shook my head. "I was waiting for it to stop hurting just to breathe." She reached over and set it gently in my lap. "Well," breathe slower, "because if that note means what we think it does, your dad left you more than just a guilt trip and a broken hip." The old metal box felt heavier now, as if the truth inside had gained weight since the fall. I unfastened the rusted latch again, lifted the bundle of papers, and peeled back the top sheet, the note. For Emily, my true legacy lies where truth is hidden. I stared at those words, my father's writing still clear despite the yellowing of time. He'd never been poetic. If he said something like that, it meant there was something he needed me to find. Beneath the note was a folded bank brochure from downtown Durham, the kind that came in direct mailers and usually went straight to recycling. But someone had circled the address in red pen. Tucked inside the brochure was a narrow envelope, containing a safe deposit box key marked Box 1376, and then a list. Dozens of scribbled words written in a shorthand only my father would use. Some were underlined, some had dates, some were just numbers. I handed it to Jenny. She frowned. This is coded, like he didn't want anyone to understand it unless they knew him. I smiled faintly. Classic Dad. Hide the truth in plain sight and dare you to work for it. I sank back into the pillows, the papers still trembling slightly in my hands. He didn't forget me, I whispered. Jenny looked at me, eyes softening. Of course he didn't. No, I said, louder now. Aaron was always the loud one, the obvious heir. Everyone assumed he'd take the reins, even I did, but this was planned. I tapped the envelope with the key inside. He knew what Aaron would do, and he made sure I had something no one could touch. Jenny leaned forward. We need to go to that bank as soon as you can stand. I nodded. We're not telling anyone. You think Aaron would care? Oh, he'd care, I said darkly. He'd care if he thought there was anything left he didn't control. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the beeping of the IV monitor counting time like a metronome. Do you think this is money? Jenny finally asked. I stared at the ceiling. Maybe, but if I know my father, it's not just about money, it's about legacy, about the truth. Something he couldn't say out loud. Maybe something he was ashamed of. Or proud of, I said, gripping the note. But too scared to fight Aaron over, so he left it to me knowing I'd dig. Jenny smirked. Well, you always did love puzzles. I smiled, even through the ache. And revenge. 10 days later, I walked into the bank with a slight limp and a storm in my chest. My sling was gone now, replaced with a soft brace. The bruises were fading. But inside me, the ache had sharpened into something focused. Something that pulsed every time I remembered Aaron's smug face and those keys spinning around his finger. Jenny walked beside me, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. You ready for this? She whispered. I nodded, holding the envelope with the safe deposit key like it was a loaded weapon. The bank manager greeted us with a professional smile, but his eyes flicked to my limp with quiet curiosity. Ms. Carter, he said, we've been expecting you. Your father left very specific instructions. He led us past rows of high-backed chairs and polished tellers' windows into a side hallway lined with heavy vault doors. My heart pounded with every step. In a small, windowless room, he gestured to a thick metal cabinet. Box 1376, he said, inserting a secondary key into the dual lock system. Your key, please. My hand trembled slightly as I passed it over. The click echoed like a gunshot. He slid the box out and placed it on the table. I'll give you privacy, he said with a respectful nod before stepping out and closing the door behind him. I stared at the box for a long moment, then I opened it. Inside was a leather folder, rich, dark brown, the kind my father always used for serious matters. Across the top, stamped in gold leaf, were the words, Addendum to Will. My breath hitched. Next to it sat a certified bank document. My eyes scanned the numbers once, then twice. Then again, just to be sure I wasn't hallucinating. Account balance, $4,507,241.82. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Jenny leaned over and whispered, Emily, what is this? I handed her the document. She stared. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Is this? It's real, I said. He hid it. My father, quiet, methodical, deeply principled, had stashed away over $4 million. And left it entirely to me. Jenny looked like she might faint. This changes everything. But I shook my head. No, this isn't about revenge. This isn't about showing off. I tapped the folder. It's about what he couldn't say while he was alive. I opened the addendum. It was a legal document, witnessed, signed, notarized, dated exactly 3 months before Dad's death. In it, he detailed his reasons for the private account, for keeping the money hidden from Aaron and the business, for giving me control of the farm and the assets held under his personal name instead of the corporate trust. Aaron, it read, has become what I once feared, reckless, entitled, and indifferent to the name I spent a lifetime building. Emily sees people. Emily understands value beyond dollars. This money is not for show. It is for her to use when the time is right to do what I could not. I covered my mouth with my hand. Tears welled, but they didn't fall, because this wasn't just inheritance, it was validation. A whisper from the grave saying, I saw you, I always saw you. Jenny reached out and gripped my hand. What are you going to do? She asked. I folded the folder closed and looked up at her. First, I said, I'm going home, quietly, no moves, no posts, no press, just silence. Jenny raised an eyebrow. And then, I tucked the folder under my arm and smiled. A slow, deliberate smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Then I watch, because if Aaron thinks he's sitting comfortably on that throne forever, I let the words hang in the air like smoke. Some truths don't need to be shouted. Some just need to be timed perfectly. I didn't tell a soul. Not about the 4.5 million sitting silently under my name. Not about the secret addendum that bore my father's trembling signature. Not even about the key that unlocked all of it, his trust, his plan, his last whisper of love. Instead, I returned to my quiet house in Durham, the one with the leaky faucet and the peeling porch paint. The one Aaron always mocked. I sat on that porch every morning with my coffee, watching squirrels skitter across power lines, and made it look like my world hadn't shifted an inch. But inside, everything had changed. I opened a new laptop, a fresh email, an alias, and I started watching. Carter Industrial Group had a glossy website now, all black and gold like a boutique vodka label. The new CEO, Aaron, was featured in a slick promo video, talking about legacy innovation and aggressive expansion. I watched his hands as he spoke, gesturing too much. A tic he'd had since we were kids, and he lied about stealing my Halloween candy. Jenny came by that afternoon with takeout and wine. She kicked off her shoes and flopped onto my couch like she owned the place. Tell me you're at least enjoying this a little, she said, handing me the wine. I smirked. Enjoying? I'm studying him like a case file. And I was. Every press release, every earnings call, every investor Q&A, I read them all. I mapped timelines, cross-checked statements, followed threads on niche financial forums. The cracks were already forming. One user on an investor site wrote, they launched a new division last quarter and there's already churn. 2 VPs gone in 6 months. Another replied, Aaron Carter's style is all flash, no fundamentals. If Daddy didn't build the foundation, it would have collapsed already. Jenny leaned over my shoulder one night as I clicked through comments. You think he knows? She asked. No, he thinks I'm sitting in a farmhouse crying into a bag of frozen peas. She laughed. You're sitting on enough money to buy a mid-sized town. Exactly, and we're going to use it right. I didn't want the company just to spite Aaron. I wanted to restore what it used to be, what Dad built with handshake deals and a reputation that meant something. Before Aaron turned it into a luxury brand with no soul, I called a lawyer, quietly. We discussed shell corporations, trusts, how to move without raising flags. I explained the goal without giving away my name. Discretion, I told him, was non-negotiable. He smiled and said, Miss Carter, you'd be amazed how many fortunes are built in silence. I smiled back. Silence was my new superpower. Aaron didn't know I was watching him. Didn't know I'd spent nights cataloging his reckless spending. The European business trip that was actually a yacht party, the marketing firm that billed 3 times industry rate, the lease on the penthouse suite he called HQ2. He was bleeding the company dry with a smile on his face. But it wasn't just about the spreadsheets. It was about the people. I read former employees' exit interviews. Some had left quietly. Others had stories to tell, about ignored warnings, cut corners, lost clients. They didn't know who I was, but I took notes. Each one of them helped me build my map, my timeline, my case. I wasn't planning a viral takedown or a public feud. That wasn't my style. No, I was planning something my father would have called surgical. I wanted Aaron to walk into a room and realize too late that every wall had been replaced behind his back, that the floor he stood on belonged to me now. that the empire he thought he inherited had simply been rented until I came to collect. Every night before I closed my laptop, I whispered the same words into the silence. Not yet, because timing was everything. And when it came to justice, I had nothing but time. It started with a whisper, just a single sentence tucked inside a local trade blog. Carter Industrial Group loses major logistics contract due to delayed fulfillment. To most people, it read like routine corporate noise. But to me, it was blood in the water. I bookmarked it, calm on the outside, heart galloping inside my chest. One drop, I thought. The first of many. 3 days later, another ping. One of the company's manufacturing partners filed a motion to terminate their agreement early. Material breach, the filing read. I didn't need to ask why. Aaron had probably redirected funds meant for payroll into another overpriced executive summit with catered sushi and drone footage. I didn't celebrate. I didn't blink. Instead, I leaned in. From the shadows of my modest living room, I became a storm chaser. Jenny came over every night with Thai food and printouts. The couch became our war room. She flipped through another spreadsheet. This is your brother's version of leadership. The guy's spending like the money will refill itself. It won't, I said, because it was never his to begin with. And these reports, she held up a breakdown of department losses. Entire teams are quitting. I nodded. Dad built this company like a family. Aaron's burning it like firewood. I picked up my phone and scrolled to his Instagram. There he was sipping scotch on a rooftop in Atlanta, grinning in a designer jacket that probably cost more than a year of health benefits for an entry-level employee. Caption: stress is for interns. I wanted to scream, but I didn't, because screaming gives away your position, and I wasn't finished moving my pawns. My shell company, registered months ago under an untraceable corporate veil, had already approached 2 shareholders quietly. My lawyer, Robert, arranged the meetings. They didn't know who the real buyer was. They didn't need to. All they needed to hear were the words: solvent strategy, recovery plan, silent capital partner. Their ears perked up like wolves. And then late one night, my phone buzzed. Aaron. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. A year ago, I would have dropped everything to answer. Now I swiped. His face filled my screen, less polished now. Eyes sunken, shirt wrinkled. Sweat beaded near his temple and not from heat. Emily, he said, forcing a weak smile. Wow, I replied coolly. Look who remembered my number. He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. Not true, you rank just above telemarketers. He tried to laugh, but it died in his throat. Listen, I need your help. My eyebrow lifted. Help. Like you helped me at the lawyer's office, at Dad's funeral. His face cracked then, a flicker of real panic. I know I messed up, okay? I was grieving. Wrong, stupid. And I got in over my head with the company, the board's losing confidence. We lost 2 clients this week. I need someone I can trust. Why me? I asked, letting the question sit like ice on the line. Because you understand this business, he said. You understand Dad's values. And you, he hesitated, swallowing hard. You were always better than me at the real stuff, people, planning. You could fix this. Wow, I said. Flattery from a drowning man, that's new. He laughed, but it cracked halfway. Look, I'll give you equity, control if you want it. Just please don't let everything go under. And there it was, the moment I had waited for. My brother, who once looked me in the eye and said, a broken-down farm, that's your prize. Now asking me to save his legacy with hands he'd tried to erase me from. I leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. Do you remember the last thing Dad ever said to me? Aaron blinked, confused. He said, you've always been the one I'm proud of. He said it after you refused to fly home. After I watched him fade away, knowing you didn't care enough to say goodbye. Aaron's eyes dropped. I let the silence stretch. You didn't need me at the funeral, I said softly. You don't get me now. And I ended the call. No yelling, no threats, just cold, surgical precision. Jenny stared at me from the kitchen doorway. Did you just turn him down? I nodded. That was me telling him I've already moved on. She walked over slowly. So what happens now? I met her eyes. Now we finish what Dad started. A week after that call, I signed the final documents. The shell firm, Granite Hollow Acquisitions, now officially controlled 51% of Carter Industrial Group. My father's company. The one Aaron inherited with a smirk and a rose and a ceremony he didn't earn. The transfer was clean, silent, efficient. Aaron never saw my name. That was the best part. My lawyer, Robert, handed me a thick folder and said, "He won't know until the boardroom announcement, and even then he won't see it coming." I thanked him and walked out into the crisp October air, feeling the first true breath of power settle across my shoulders like a new coat. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation, but it wasn't easy to wait. Every instinct in me wanted to drive straight to headquarters, throw open the doors, and scream, "Guess who owns your golden empire now?" But I didn't. Instead, I let him keep playing his game, burning cash, cutting corners, posting beach selfies while the company rotted from the inside. The silence was delicious. Until one night, just before the final transition, I got a call from a former executive assistant. She'd heard whispers, something about an emergency board meeting, Aaron calling in favors, trying to raise capital through a shady offshore partner. "Emily," she said, voice low and urgent, "he knows something's wrong, he's getting desperate." I smiled. "Let him scramble, it won't help." Then I hung up and called Jenny. "It's time," I said. "Let's set the trap." That weekend, I sat at my desk and drafted a private letter to the board of directors. In it, I revealed my identity as the principal stakeholder behind Granite Hollow. I included a signed directive from my father, the addendum to his will, and a list of documented failures under Aaron's leadership. Missed milestones, lost clients, misappropriated funds. No drama, no emotion, just facts. On Monday morning, I slipped on a slate-gray blazer, tied my hair back, and walked into the company's downtown tower with my lawyer at my side. Employees barely glanced at us. The receptionist asked if I had an appointment. "I do," I said. "I'm expected upstairs." In the elevator, I watched the floors tick upward, my heart beating like a war drum, slow and deliberate. The top floor opened into a sleek glass hallway. I could already hear the voices behind the boardroom door, tense, clipped. Then I walked in. Silence. Aaron was standing at the head of the table, mid-sentence. His jaw went slack as he saw me. "Emily," he breathed. I smiled, small, controlled. "Good morning," I said. "Please don't let me interrupt." The chairman of the board, a gray-haired man named Phillips who had worked with our father for decades, stood up. "You're the one behind Granite Hollow?" he asked. I nodded and handed over the folder. He opened it, scanned the documents, and looked up at Aaron. "She owns the majority," he said quietly. Aaron's face went pale. "No, that's not. This is a trick." "She's not even. I'm exactly what this company needs," I said, walking to the front of the room. "And starting today, I'm taking responsibility for everything you've broken." "You can't just walk in and take over," Aaron snapped. I turned to him. "You already did. Only difference is I know what I'm doing." A hush fell over the room. Then Phillips cleared his throat and said, "Board protocol allows a change in executive leadership under majority ownership. If Ms. Carter is prepared to assume operational control." "I am," I said firmly. Aaron laughed, a hollow, panicked sound. "You don't even want this company," he said. "You're not cutthroat enough to lead it." "No," I replied. "I'm not cutthroat." I paused, leaned forward, and let my words land like thunder. "I'm smarter." And just like that, it was done. The motion passed. The gavel came down. The Carter name was back where it belonged, but with a different set of rules. Aaron stood frozen, like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. I looked at him, and for the first time in years, he had nothing to say. And I had everything. Monday morning felt different. The air outside the Carter Industrial Building was sharp and clean, like it had been waiting for the shift. The sky, a cool Carolina blue, had no idea what was about to go down inside that boardroom. But I did. I stood in front of the mirror that morning, adjusting the cuffs of a tailored navy blazer. My hair was pulled back in a sleek bun, my expression calm. My father's watch, one he wore to every negotiation, rested on my wrist. I didn't need armor. I was the storm. "Don't forget the folder," Jenny called from the living room, holding it up. Inside was everything: financial records, board minutes, the shareholder vote, and a timeline of Aaron's mismanagement so damning it could sink a political campaign. "Thanks," I said, sliding it into my briefcase. "Ready?" She looked me over. "He's not." We stepped into the elevator at corporate headquarters at 8:57 a.m., 3 minutes before the emergency board meeting. My heels echoed across the marble floor like a countdown. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, I entered the boardroom. The tension hit me instantly, tight jaws, restless fingers, eyes that darted between me and Aaron, who stood near the whiteboard, looking like a man trying to keep his empire from toppling. He turned slowly as I walked in. "You have to be joking," he muttered. I placed my briefcase on the conference table and calmly sat down at the head. "You're in my seat," I said. The room went dead quiet. Aaron laughed, nervous, forced. "This is some kind of stunt. I don't care what papers you forged. This company isn't yours." Phillips, the chairman, cleared his throat. "It is now," he said quietly. "The majority ownership transferred last week, all legal, all documented." "I'm not stepping down," Aaron barked, his voice rising. "I built this version of the company, I took it to the next level. And now it's plummeting," I replied. "Let's not forget the contracts you lost, the employees you bled dry, or the investors preparing to sue." I slid the folder toward him. He didn't touch it. "This company was built by our father," I said, standing. "Brick by brick, handshake by handshake, you treated it like a party. I'm here to restore it and protect what's left." He looked at me, stunned. "You don't know the first thing about running a corporation." "I know how to lead," I said, "which is more than you can say." The board members exchanged glances. A few nodded. I had already won them over with numbers. Now I was sealing it with truth. I looked around the table. "You've seen the reports, you know the losses, you know what this company was and what it became under Aaron. I'm not asking for your trust. I'm showing you why it was never supposed to be his in the first place." Phillips stood. "I call for a vote to transfer executive authority to Ms. Emily Carter, acting majority shareholder." Hands went up one by one, all of them. Aaron stood motionless, shocked, defeated, stripped. "This has to be illegal," he whispered. "It's not," I said. "It's poetic." Security appeared at the doorway, unobtrusive, respectful. One of them gave a nod. Aaron looked at me, disbelief flashing into something almost childlike. "You're actually going to do this?" "You already did," I said. "When you lied, when you laughed, when you chose ego over family." As the guard stepped forward, he flinched but didn't resist. "This company is going to collapse without me," he said, voice cracking. "No," I said quietly. "It collapsed because of you. I'm the one rebuilding it." He turned one last time before they let him out. "I was wrong," he said, eyes full of regret. "I've learned my lesson." But I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because the silence was no longer empty. It was power. My power. The room fell quiet as the doors closed behind him. For a moment, no one moved. Then Phillips smiled just slightly. "Welcome back, Miss Carter." I nodded. "Let's get to work." They say revenge is best served cold, but I disagree. Revenge, the kind that settles deep into your bones and rewrites your entire spine, that kind is served with clarity, with calm, with an audience. That afternoon, I called for an emergency shareholder meeting. Not just the board, everyone, investors, partners, department heads. People who'd once shaken my father's hand in trust, and those who'd barely known we were siblings. Jenny stood at the back of the conference hall, a quiet sentinel. She didn't have to say anything. Her presence alone reminded me who I'd become. Aaron wasn't there yet. Of course he wasn't. I'd expected that. His pride would delay him. He'd come in late, disheveled, maybe hoping this was still fixable. I stepped up to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here on short notice," I began. "Today is not about punishment, it's about truth and legacy." The screen behind me lit up with slides, simple, direct. Under the prior leadership, Carter Industrial suffered unprecedented losses, not just in profit margins but in reputation, in values. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. I clicked again. 3 graphs appeared: declining contract renewals, employee retention, investor confidence, each with a sharp drop, and Aaron's smiling face at the corresponding date. I won't stand here and ask for forgiveness for my brother's decisions. Because I didn't make them, I said, voice steady. But I will take responsibility for the future. Just then, the side door creaked open. Aaron walked in wearing yesterday's suit. The tie was loose, his expression stiff. Eyes scanned the room, then found me, and locked. I nodded slightly. He didn't return it. "Let's talk plainly," I continued. This company didn't fail overnight. It was bled, quietly, carelessly, until the foundation cracked. I held up a folder when the shareholders had already been given in print. These are records of misappropriated spending, unjustified bonuses, loss of vendor relationships, and questionable offshore transfers, approved under Aaron Carter's watch. Aaron stepped forward. You don't know what I was dealing with. I know exactly what you were dealing with, I snapped, cutting him off for the first and last time. You were dealing with power, and you didn't know what to do with it. Silence. He took another step, more hesitant this time. I was trying to grow the business. No, I said. You were trying to grow yourself, your image, your bank account, your legend. I turned to the audience. And in doing so, he disrespected the name that built this room. There it was, the final nail, my father's name. And I wasn't going to let it die in gold-plated incompetence. I'm invoking Article 9B of the bylaws, I said clearly. Effective immediately, Aaron Carter is stripped of all executive authority and shareholder privileges. He no longer speaks for this company. Gasps, a few whispers. Aaron stared at me like he couldn't hear what I just said. That's not your decision to make, he shouted. It was, I said. When I became majority shareholder, when you begged for help and I said no, when you hung up on Dad as he was dying and I stayed. His jaw clenched. Security stepped forward, not as dramatically as last time, just a quiet readiness. Aaron looked around the room, hoping for someone to protest. No one did, not even Phillips. Don't do this, Aaron said, voice barely audible. I stepped down from the podium, walked toward him, stopped only a few inches from his face. You didn't just destroy the company, Aaron, I said, my voice low and deliberate. You broke our father's heart. He blinked fast, eyes suddenly red-rimmed. I was wrong, he whispered. I've learned my lesson. I studied him, really studied him, for a flicker of remorse. A shred of boyhood vulnerability that used to show through when we were kids. And maybe, just maybe, I saw it. But I didn't answer. Because forgiveness isn't a currency I owe. I stepped aside and let security walk him out. No handcuffs, no screaming. Just a quiet exit for a man who finally realized the weight of his own choices. As the doors closed behind him, I turned to the shareholders. I won't promise overnight miracles, I said. But I will promise this, the Carter name will mean something again. And they stood, one by one. They stood for the name, for the company, for the woman who refused to stay silent in the shadows. For me, the storm had passed. Not the dramatic kind, but the one that rips through your life, rearranges everything, and leaves you standing in the quiet, blinking in the sunlight. That's where I was now, no longer the underdog, no longer someone else's shadow, just Emily Carter, CEO, daughter, survivor. The first few months were brutal. The company was still bleeding. Departments were demoralized, and everywhere I looked I found pieces of Aaron's carelessness stitched into the seams of operations. But I didn't flinch. I called for transparency, not just in spreadsheets but in conversation. Every department head had a voice at the table. Every contract was reevaluated. I reinstated ethics reviews, hosted open Q&A sessions with employees, and set clear human policies. Real work. Quiet, grinding, relentless. Somewhere in that chaos, I found purpose. Jenny became my unofficial chief morale officer. She'd walk through the office with donuts and sharp commentary on bad PowerPoints. You're building a company that feels like a person, she told me one afternoon, watching the staff trickle out for lunch. That was always the dream, I said. Not just profits, people. Meanwhile, Aaron faded from the headlines, no lawsuits, no press releases, just silence. Until one morning, about 6 months after his exit, Jenny sent me a photo. It was a grainy image taken on someone's phone, Aaron in a basic polo shirt, standing behind a rental counter at an auto dealership 2 towns over. My thumb hovered over the screen. Is that really him? I asked. Jenny nodded slowly. Looks like he's starting over. The man who once ordered foie gras to a private jet was now filling out rental agreements and walking customers through mileage limits. And something strange settled in my chest, not anger, not triumph, a kind of quiet peace. People fall, sometimes hard, sometimes for the first time in their lives, but when you fall far enough, you finally meet the ground. And that's where the rebuilding starts. He hadn't asked for another chance, but maybe life had given him one anyway. Meanwhile, under my leadership, the company had finally stabilized. Profits were still modest, but steady. A respected sustainability group invited us to speak on ethical practices. One of the clients we lost early on returned, quietly, without ceremony, and signed a long-term deal. But what really made me feel like we'd turned a corner wasn't a press feature or a stock uptick. It was a handwritten note, left on my desk after a staff meeting, unsigned. "Thank you for making this a place worth showing up for again." I sat with that note for a long time. Because at the end of it all, legacy isn't just about bloodlines or buildings. It's about how people feel when they say your name. And finally, after all this time, the Carter name didn't sting anymore. It stood. And so did I. I waited for the first golden weekend of October. The kind my father used to love, when the air smelled like wood smoke and sun-warmed leaves, and the light poured across the hills like honey. That morning, I packed a bouquet of sunflowers into the backseat and drove to the cemetery on the edge of town, where the gravel crunched softly beneath my tires and the wind moved in slow waves through the trees. It had been a year since I held his hand for the last time. A year since Aaron sneered in a lawyer's office and tossed me a rusted key like it was a curse. A year since I'd been forced to face not only loss, but betrayal. But now, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't broken. I was free. I knelt down in front of his headstone, brushing away a few stray leaves. The granite was smooth and cool under my fingers, the engraving simple, James Carter, builder of more than just business. I smiled, even through the sting in my eyes. "I kept my promise," I whispered. "You didn't raise a fool." The wind answered, soft and full of presence. Like maybe, just maybe, he was still listening. "I know everyone thought you gave me nothing," I said. "But what you left me was everything. Truth, courage, and the quiet, steady belief that if I kept walking, even through fire, I'd find my way out." I thought about the coded note, the box, the map, the key in the dirt. He hadn't left me broken. He'd left me a trail. And when I followed it, not blindly, but bravely, I found more than money. I found my voice, my spine, my power, and I used it. Used it to strip away lies, to rebuild something sacred, to bring our name back from the edge of ruin, not for pride, but for honor. I stood slowly, pressing my hand to the top of the headstone. "Thank you for seeing me," I said, when no one else did. Behind me, the trees rustled. A gust swirled the leaves into little golden spirals at my feet, and for a moment, everything felt like closure. Not the ending of a story, but the settling of one chapter before the next begins. I walked back to the car, not burdened, not bitter, just steady. And as I pulled away, I looked in the rearview mirror one last time, not to grieve, but to honor, to remember that resilience is born in the quiet. And in that quiet, I'd found something no one could take from me, not Aaron, not time, not even death. Freedom. And from that freedom, I'd finally built the life I was meant to live. Have you ever had to walk through fire to reclaim your peace? Share your story in the comments. And if this journey resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more stories of strength, survival, and quiet revenge. Emily's story may be ending, but yours might just be beginning.